Good morning to you, and thank you very much for staying with us. You're listening to Smooth 98.1. This is Smooth Breakfast with me, Valentine.
And Fola, good morning.
Good morning to you, and special thanks to the gentleman for stepping in this cold morning, Nwaji at the corporate MC. Good morning, Nwaji.
Good morning, Valentine, and good morning, Lagos.
Good morning to you, Cheta, as well. Cheta is joining us this morning for Freshly Pressed. Hello, Cheta.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm very well. It's been a while. We saw you on a Friday morning. Glad to have you
Well,
join us.
I just happen to be around.
Cheta, we can't hear you well.
Is it my fault that you have a faulty mic?
We don't have a faulty mic, Cheta. Just speak up, eh? It's a feel good Friday, right? You can join Cheta at chxta, CHXTA on Twitter, the troublesome one. In the meantime, we'll get into the stories, but here's how you can send in your messages. On WhatsApp, it is 0809 444 0981. That's WhatsApp. On Twitter,
It's at Smooth 91 FM. Hashtag is freshly pressed 91.
our first story is from the Punch newspaper. Also, a reminder that we're streaming live on YouTube, so please type Smooth 91 FM Lagos in the search box and you'll find us there. You can also use that to leave a message. From the Punch newspaper, NECA, NACCIMA, LCCI, FUME as Buhari asks governors to raise IGR. So the president, Muhammad Buhari, on Thursday, that's yesterday, asked the governors of the 36 states to raise their internally generated revenues and value added tax in the next 4 years. This sparked a reaction from several groups. The acronyms have been read, included in the headline. We have people from those who just form a group, a coalition of employers of labor, a coalition of people who generally fight the cause of the ordinary citizen and the laborers, the labor workers. Cheta, here they are saying that this decision by the presidency was not well thought out.
Not a
That
decision, a statement.
Okay, so the statement was they said it is not well thought out, that the federal government should realize that the state governors would, by this decision, leave the
Statements.
by this statement leave the brunt of the responsibility on the ordinary man and the worker. Your thoughts?
In some respects, they are right. So, for example, the Lagos State Chamber of Commerce and Industry and NACCIMA said that they should tax the wealthy and the political class. Um, NECA said that increasing Nigeria and VAT will impoverish Nigerians,
Mm.
as if Nigerians are not already poor. This statement by the president, I would like to remind that the president once told somebody that you deal in figures, I deal in facts. This statement does not look at the facts. And the answer is in front of the president, the constitution which he swore by just 21 days ago now.
Mhm.
The It's all about incentives and asking the states to increase IGR without giving them practical options on how to do it means that they will simply double down on long suffering Nigerians.
Mhm.
So let's give a practical example because these states essentially are handcuffed in many respects. Practical example, coming here, Amadou Bello Way is a federal road.
Mm.
It has this major choke point near Federal Palace Hotel where the road has essentially collapsed. And there isn't much that the Lagos state government can do without the permission of the federal government. Some of you listening now are trapped in the Independence, so-called Independence Tunnel in Maryland,
Mm.
on Ikorodu Road, also a
Traffic.
federal road.
Mhm.
Because of the bad road, there's not much that the Lagos state government can do. These are just practical examples of how the federal government hobbles the states. Our constitution has something called the exclusive legislative list, 58 items which only the federal government has a right to touch.
Okay.
If the states want to touch them, they need permission. Some of these things should be done by local governments. So, for example, bankruptcy, copyright, fingerprint identification, criminal records, registration of a business name. Why do I have to wait for Abuja to do all of that when it can be done either at the state or even, fingerprinting and the criminal records can be done at a local level and then the information shared.
Should that also include the change of name on the international passports? As now
No,
we know that
international passport is a sovereign
It's
issue.
okay.
That one is totally that
That's federal.
federal,
Federal.
all well and good.
Okay.
The point is, as long as we don't have incentives for productivity at the state level or at the local level, it's easier for them to just go and suck breast in Abuja every month. That's what they do.
I actually agree with Cheta on
But,
this
yes.
because you have to get creative with regards to how you generate revenue. And I think the points that he has listed is a fantastic way of doing that. But if you allow the federal behemoth that it is to continuously choke you out, then you kind of cripple yourself from being innovative with regards to how best you can generate revenue. And then these avenues of registering businesses, licensing, and all things that should operate within a state are not being done because the federal apparatus is just there for you to just latch onto.
Yes, but would you say this was ill-informed or ill-intentioned, based on the premise of Paris Club refund and
I would say not
state
properly
governors
thought through.
resorting to that? We've been talking about this here.
Valentine, I like
encouraging
the
state
word
governors.
you use, ill-intention, but your habits and your body language, ill-intended or not, still have consequences,
Yes.
right? So it's not necessarily about whether you meant to do it, but the fact that you didn't think things through, like Cheta said, still has severe consequences that everybody's suffering from now.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to the next story from this day newspaper. Sack all political appointees or renew their tenure. Falana is asking the federal government. That's human rights lawyer and senior advocate of Nigeria, Mr. Femi Falana. He's urged President Muhammadu Buhari to sack all the political appointees or renew their tenure without further delay, stressing that all the political appointees have a 4-year tenure that's meant to expire May 29th. And based on the fact that they haven't been appointed, new appointments haven't been made or renewed so far, they have overstepped their bounds. Just the fear, which is real, that if any decision made within this time, that after the expiration of their tenure officially, that could be used against them in court. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I don't quite understand that. I think what Femi Falana is just more or less speaking to is the constitutionality of the situation, which has been that is either you sack them or you renew the tenure of what they're doing.
Just make it official.
Just make it official. So I think he's making a pretty straightforward statement with specific regards to what is the proper thing and the right thing to do.
Yes.
Now, why this particular dispensation has not done that, that's another conversation that we need to have. And I think he's just urging so that you don't now create further issues that you need to have. Now, to the point that you've made about the fear of people now being out of that position, are you referring to things of immunity, maybe things that they have done? Who knows? Remember, these are federal appointees. They're not necessarily political individuals. So it should...
Not necessarily. What I'm referring to is maybe just say, okay, assuming, would you say that they're occupying the same position up till now is illegal?
Yes.
Okay.
Because
so
if they...
now that we've established it's illegal, I mean, they're still holding those offices because there are no new appointments
but
yet.
think about what happened with Emefiele and the CBN governor. That was done within the constitutionality of what is supposed to be done, which is that his tenure was renewed.
Yes.
And that was done in line with the timeline. So why haven't these other positions, why haven't they followed suit?
That is the real question.
Yeah, so that's what I don't understand. So to your point, yes, it's not proper. Okay.
Thank you very much. Holding the government to account is something we should always encourage. New Telegraph has the next story. Also, KYARI replaces Baru, and this is not Ada KYARI, replaces Baru as NNPC Group Managing Director. The person we're referring to is Kolo KYARI. He has been said to have had or has over 27 years experience in the petroleum industry, but seeing his appointments being made and other appointments associated with this, Cheta, please, what are your thoughts on this story?
Okay, I think it's important to first start with a correction because many media outlets yesterday started that Mele Kyari's brother, his younger brother to the president's former chief of staff. I don't know if he's former because we Abba Kyari. For the records, Abba Kyari is his ethnic group is Shua Arab, while Mele Kyari is Kanuri.
But they're both from the same state, Borno.
Kyari is a fairly common name in that part, so it's not.
So you see why people just want to make the connection somehow.
The problem is that in this country, we are very good for rumors, and the people who would have corrected it yesterday, the APC social media wing, were busy protesting. So that's they were not on seats yesterday. Now, Mele Kyari's appointments, I spoke with quite a number of people, and what I got is that he doesn't really have any cross-divisional management experience within the NNPC. To so many people, he's an unknown quantity, and he was promoted very rapidly through the ranks starting in 2015. Aside from that, they all say he's a very taciturn fellow. You really cannot tell what he's thinking. What all of this tells me is that he will not really rock the boats. And at this point in time, I think we need someone at the head of the NNPC who will shake things up in reality. But it's only watch and see. NNPC, to be honest, is a dead organization anyway. I don't know why it
Why
still
would you say
exists.
They are still functional. No, I need you to explain what you mean by dead organization, just for clarity.
It doesn't have any, as in it doesn't have any real bearing in the way, it doesn't have any effect in. So take for example Saudi Aramco. That's a proper oil company.
Okay.
NNPC is not. NNPC has been reduced to a shadow of what it was meant to be.
Okay.
I don't even know where to start. If we start talking of NNPC now, let me just summarize it like this. April 1, 1977 is the biggest April Fool joke ever played in this country. That was the day NNPC was formed.
Thank you very much, Cheta. Let's take some of your messages. Remember that WhatsApp number is 0809 444 981. Why do you have the thoughts to share?
No.
Okay. Facial expressions. Long message. Okay, please add your names to your messages so we can take them. Adeyinka from Ikoyi says, Cheta, while I agree that with you that the government activities have to be unbundled, there are so many opportunities for the states to harness their unique resources. Agriculture and primary secondary education are quick wins. Not always complain. Let's be solution oriented. Emeka Adjo said,
Good morning. The federal government should remove that permission clause before the state can repair some roads so that the state can promote its economical environment.
all right. Emma from Akoka says, people who love this feeding bottle federalism though, each state, you meant to say, should find solutions that are unique to them in generating internally generated revenue. Proportionate taxes is a no-brainer. And Shego here says Buhari should have just told the governors to start working. In about 30 states, many of their citizens are migrating to either Lagos, Ibadan, Port Harcourt, Kano, because those governors are just, he said in his words, plain lazy.
All right, let's move on to the next story we have here. And this is from THISDAY newspaper. Boko Haram releases core member abducted in January.
Okay. First and foremost, I'm sure that the families of the individual who was released must be very, very elated. So I think we should all join in celebrating that, somebody has been released back into their normal life, away from captivity. But this now begins to speak to a larger issue regarding backdoor negotiations that must happen when you are dealing with a terrorist group that now operates within your territorial borders. Is that you have to be open to these conversations because it's the only way you're going to get some kind of, movement or some kind of progress. Now, I always say that terrorist groups operate, I think even ISIS, who are very, very deadly and intentional with what they do, but terrorist organizations always want something. They're not just operating just for the sake of it. They always want something. And so Boko Haram exists for a particular reason. There must be something that they want. So when you now begin to have skilled negotiators who can now serve between, it's like a tripartite thing that now happens between the government, the terrorist organization, and to some extent the media, which now have to play a huge part with regards to how these conversations happen. When you now open up the channels for those conversations to happen, these are the results of it. The results being that people now get released. It's unfortunate that this kind of situations and these kind of organizations that were mentioned here that are brokering these deals, unfortunately, were not heavily present during the Bring Back Our Girls campaign, because maybe that could have resulted to a lot of releases more frequently and a lot more earlier. But I do 100% encourage for these conversations to happen. I know there are a lot of people who disagree and say that we should not negotiate with terrorists, but that's just absolute rubbish. You need to negotiate with these individuals, because when you don't, there are consequences, and consequences are people's lives are lost. So I think as long as conversations go back and forth, especially for non-combatant kidnapped people, you can now begin to see the kind of resolution you have, and at least everybody kind of gets a sense of what's going on. We saw this thing happen in the Middle East with the terrorist organizations, with the PLO and all these other organizations that were now disbanded and things now got reduced. We saw it happen in the United Kingdom with the IRA as well, where these conversations now began to happen and things now got reduced until they were disbanded. So you have to engage these individuals to first and foremost foremost stop the atrocities.
Yes.
Secondly, to stop the kidnapping. Thirdly, to somewhat disarm them from going out and carrying out these attacks. But if you do not do that, they will continue to operate with the impunity that they feel that they have. So you have to engage them consistently and constantly enough to make sure that they at least calm down with their tactics, and you get an understanding of what it is they want, and see how best you can meet each other on the table.
The deputy governor did say that this the release of this young lady is actually was negotiated as a sign of goodwill to hopefully end conflict
Yeah,
in that region.
but that's part of it. So, but you don't get to that point without having conversations regarding how do you define goodwill? How do we ensure we stop conflict? So they are clearly now demonstrating, okay, fine, that this negotiation and this conversation has moved to this stage. We are now ready to demonstrate our capacity of what we define as goodwill. It's all part of the what you call batting our best. Not back. It's a negotiating term of batting our best agreement to a negotiated alternative, whatever the case may be, to now see how best we can just agree on what we need to do.
All right. Thank you, Nwaji.
No problem.
Quick message here from Emmanuel in Ikeja. He says, I see the president's statement as an incentive to the state governors or governments to begin to make the case for those changes in administrative system, including decentralization of powers and delegation of authority that are required to facilitate the development of the state IGR. State governments and Nigeria as a whole should be tired of feeding from the bottle by now. And this one from Toyin Salmon says, where permission is needed to best serve your people, what permission sought and denied? Was permission sought and denied? Didn't Ambode fix Airport Road? Why don't they fix
Do you know how
and
long
build
it
later?
took Ambode it
took
took
a
Lagos
while.
to get
Took
that
a while.
permission. It took
It took a
Lagos
while.
they were on it for at least 5 years.
Minimum.
At least.
Minimum.
Yes. Cheta, let's have your thoughts on this story from Premium Times. Lawan bows to pressure, rescinds FESTUS ADEDAYO'S appointment. This was a very interesting conversation yesterday. But he seemed to have taken back his decision to appoint ADEDAYO, who was very critical of Buhari's administration.
ADEDAYO did say.
Yeah, no, I think there are two things that are important to point out first. Or three things actually. First, you can be a critic and still work with someone.
Yes.
One, but the level of criticism, which is the second thing, ADEDAYO'S criticisms actually, I read some of the articles and they went overboard. So
The columns on Premium Times?
the columns on Premium Times and Tribune. So those, when you read those, it's like, guys, so how I'm saying. But then the third thing to point out is that it was an offer of appointment, and to my knowledge, ADEDAYO had not yet accepted.
Yeah.
Having said all of that, it was kind of embarrassing seeing people who are much older than my 40 years protesting for political appointments, when in the grand scheme of things, they should be in control of one office or the other and not bag carriers. I would also like to point out the hypocrisy of these chaps in that they've never protested about the deteriorating security situation or unemployment, but came out in full protest, full complement to protest and appointments. Having said that, it would be a tragedy if we fail to learn lessons from this. So first, as a people, we need to understand the concept of separation of powers. What played out yesterday was APC functionaries using the power of the presidency to dictate to the legislature who they can appoint and who they can't. That's a problem. It gives us an inkling of the direction
Party oversight.
the Ninth National Assembly is headed in, which is a problem. The legislature and the executive are supposed to be separate and co-equal arms of government in the so-called democracy we practice. Second, we also need to understand that there's a difference between the party and then when they're actually in public office. So during campaign, it's a completely different ballgame. But the moment you enter office, you have to be able to form an inclusive government. You can't start saying, oh, this one is this one is this, exclude him. In some other parts of the world, you'll be hit with discrimination lawsuits. So that is something we need to start recognizing. But most importantly, I think, is the mindsets that political offices or appointments are meant to be shared as favors or compensation rather than given to the best available hand so that we can build a better country is one of the things that is holding us back as a people. And on the evidence of what we saw yesterday, it's going to hold us back for a very long time.
So, in conclusion, what would you think would have been the bigger danger?
Number one, there was clearly a process failure in picking someone who had been virulently critical of the government, as in insultingly critical.
Yes.
There was clearly a process failure.
Okay.
However, the fact, I think the big thing that's emerged for me from this is the mindset that political office, political appointments is
Reward.
something to be shared.
Mm.
So going back to our first story, we are still stuck in the mindset of feeding bottle federalism. Oh, share, share, rather than talking about productivity.
Thank you very much, Cheta. Let's move on.
Moving on to the Guardian newspaper, former President Obasanjo has lamented that nepotism in Nigeria is obstructing the fight against corruption. He said this to the presidency, describing corruption and development as strange bedfellows, and warning that people in authority would remain deluded as long as the definition of corruption is when money, goods, and services are involved. Do you agree?
Do I agree with what Obasanjo said, or it coming from Obasanjo? I think you need to qualify.
Both.
All right. So this was being said on the auspices of Nigeria ratifying joining the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, which is AFCTA, and whether or not, because we haven't signed up to it, and other countries such as Niger, Chad, Gambia, Republic of Benin have all signed up to it. So the conversation now is that Obasanjo is basically, as an elder statement, being represented from a branding point of view from the Nigerian context. It's whether or not we should speed up this aspect and not now dilly-dally and begin to worry about, just focusing on corruption, but also looking at nepotism to make sure that we take care of all these things before we now join such organizations or such movements or treaties as ACTA. Now, the issue is nepotism is wrong. Under no circumstances should, by virtue of the fact that you are related to an individual, should that grant you a position. And I think what he is saying and the spirit of it is completely true. I do agree with the statements that he made regarding how nepotism should be rooted out. When you now begin to look at some statements where he said, and I'm quoting Ambassador here, that nepotism is a form of corruption, and condoning what is bad is a height of corruption. Lack of fiscal discipline is corruption, so corruption and development cannot meet. And that is a very interesting point, because you cannot progress beyond where you are unless you root out areas that now prevent certain things to happen. Case in point to what Cheta said about how he pointed out particular parts of Lagos where you have federal oversight with the control of those roads. The reasons why we are not seeing any kind of infrastructure development or fixing of those roads is because of these particular kind of issues where corruption is just there looming as this monster that cannot be controlled, and it now begins to seed in and prevent you from actually developing. So Obasanjo is correct. We need to root out all these elements and underpin them as what they are and call them for what they are, vis-a-vis corruption, nepotism, appointing people who are not productive or qualified, or better yet, competent to handle those positions.
Because they know someone.
Exactly. So let it be about your merit and not by your bloodline. So I think these things are absolutely important. So the spirit of what he is saying is very, very true. And I will take it, at face value without necessarily digging into the man and his own track record.
Because I have a feeling you're about to say but.
I'm not going to say but. No, I will give him that reverence because the things that he said are true. Whether or not he has the
but
there's no but. Whether or not
The
he
moral
has
rights?
whether or not he has the authority or legitimacy
Yeah.
based on his own experience to make those statements, that's another conversation. But we will take what he said at face value, and we will be very happy for him making that. And he's a man in his 80s, so
But you said the but.
I didn't say a but.
No,
I
no,
didn't say
you
a but.
just did.
I said in addition.
Yeah.
So
I heard the but.
Yeah.
there's no but. It's fine.
But there's a
But
message. Though.
my personal experience
It's
of
very hot.
Obasanjo, my personal experience of Obasanjo, and it's a long story, so I won't tell it. He actually, so there was a bit of an anecdote. There was a situation where the whole ethnic thing came out, and he told one of his ministers point blank, "Why should I pick why should I pick this person over this person when this person scored higher in the interview? Okay, write me a concept paper why I should pick this other person instead of the other person." And the concept paper never came, so he picked the other person.
Okay,
All
but
right.
there have also been instances where he was favored on ethnic lines, and so it goes back and forth.
EK here says on WhatsApp, does President Buhari want the states to go on a revenue rampage or generating rampage with things like dodgy car radio licenses? Kasim says, we do not negotiate with terrorists. Folks who say that they do not have relatives captured. Thank you, Ajay. Okay.
What?
Say folks who say that do not have relatives that are captured.
So if your relative is captured, you would rather we not negotiate to have that relative released. We
That's
should
it.
just do what?
I think
No,
what
I
he's
think what
implying
he's
is that
saying-
they would negotiate if it touches you personally.
Yeah, that's why I said.
You said that. Maybe he
He's
misconstrued your
agreeing with
statement.
you.
Oh, he's agreeing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
but
right,
he
okay.
misconstrued this first part of the statement. But anyway, let's move on.
All right, moving on to the Punch newspaper, Cheta. I guess this is for you. The central bank has said it will offer loans to National Youth Service Corps members to start small and medium-scale enterprises, which they will repay in 7 years. What do you think?
Okay, first things first, we have an unemployment problem. That's not debatable.
Yeah.
However, I think that at this point, Mayfele is just doing anyway benefits central bankism. And this, unfortunately, will do nothing to convince the investors that we really desperately need to create jobs, that the CBN is an independent regulator. Now, first, let's define what a central bank is. A central bank, which in some other countries is called a reserve bank, is the institution that manages currency, money supply, and interest rates in a country or a formal monetary union and oversees the commercial banking system. There's nowhere in that definition that says that the central bank or the reserve bank should get involved in giving loans directly to individuals. Now, getting directly involved in giving loans is nowhere near the remit of a central bank. And if we look at the times that the CBN has gotten directly involved, recent times, the Anchor Borrowers program has been a disaster. When you look at such things, it's not hard to see where this is headed. Then there's that little issue of the CBN's balance sheets, which we heard about in such lurid colors on Sahara Reporters. See, we need the CBN to refocus and repurpose and then actually do what it is meant to do, so that the people who can really create jobs will be confident enough to bring their money back to us. I don't know if you heard about the UNCTDA reports, the United Nations reports, that foreign investment in the country has dropped by a magnitude of 43%. And a lot of it is because investors are not confident that the CBN, the monetary authority, is independent enough to protect their interests.
And it's that simple, because that's what you're meant to do, is create an enabling environment for these things to operate. You don't actually have to do anything else. And it's so annoying when we get into this habit that we start now giving duties to the central bank more than their remit. It doesn't make any sense. All you have to do is just make sure you are an independent player that is objective first. So that way, once you do that, invest. You don't need to do anything. Investors will find their way here and stimulate funds into the economy so that people can get jobs and we can reduce unemployment. So it's mind-boggling that we begin to think that this thing is actually more complex than it is.
And some of these things that they are just doing will be taken over by private establishments.
Of course, and that's when nepotism comes in.
Kwame Praise actually sent in this message from Lagos. He says, on President telling governors to increase IGR, the states actually need to be more creative in revenue generation. Revenue generation does not always have to impoverish Nigerians. States can collaborate together to pool resources for farming or find markets for their produce, like Lagos and Kebbi. A lot that can be done. Only we have men who are self-serving leading the states.
All right, and this final story this morning is the NCC moving to secure Nigeria's cyberspace. You can find this in the Vanguard newspaper. The Nigerian Communications Commission yesterday said it has established an internet industry code of practice for internet service providers in the country to secure the country's cyberspace from intrusion by unauthorized users.
All right, so I need more meat on this story. It's a bit on this initiative. I need to know who you're partnering with, which IT security firms are you looking at, what cyber hacking data are you going to now begin to go into, what security with regards to data protection are you looking into. We need specifics. Nigerians are intelligent enough who play in the space, who actually operate in the space and do this in a private capacity. For you want to take it to a general policy, let's not get some more meat on it so we can understand what the actual step-by-steps, internet data protection, and everything else you need to do to not get things going. That's all I'm saying. Let's just have some more meat to the story. Let's not come out and make statements about we're going to protect cyberspace. What is that?
And cyberspace is beyond social media. Let's just say. OBJ
Maybe that's what they
Sounds like
meant.
a diss.
And it's not. No, I'm just saying. OBJ from Lekki said, Cheta, I doubt what he said, or Cheta is wrong, that's what he said. Developmental functions is part of the CBN's mandate.
No, oh my God.
Thank God said no be me answer. I think this
Seriously?
We're done.
I didn't say anything. No.
Special thanks to
Nwaji.
this gentleman in the studio. It's so very rare to have Cheta Nwaeze on the same show. I'm so glad to have you. Cheta at chxta on Twitter, that's CHXTA. Nwaji is a corporate MC with a K. That corporate starts with a K in a sense. On Twitter, send a message to them. Let's continue this conversation with hashtag freshlypressed91. Good morning.
You see that comment
feel
is
your
why we're where we are.